Hey everyone, ready to dive in?
Always.
Today, we're looking at Squid.io. It's been blowing up on Hacker News.
Yeah, I've seen it around.
Like JQ, but for databases. Imagine using that same syntax, but for Postgres, MySQL, even CSVs.
That's a pretty bold claim. It does sound interesting, though.
Right. But is it really a game changer? Or just another shiny new tool?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've seen this before. A new tool comes along promising to be the be-all and end-all.
Exactly. And sometimes it delivers, and sometimes not so much.
The promise of Squid.io is definitely alluring, though. A single query language across different data sources, that's a developer's dream.
No kidding. Who wants to juggle a bunch of different syntaxes?
But, and this is a big but, we already have some pretty powerful tools for data manipulation. So, what problem is Squid.io really solving? Is it a problem that even needs solving?
I like where your head's at because a lot of developers in the Hacker News thread are asking the same thing. And one thing I keep seeing pop up is the whole conciseness argument, especially compared to SQL.
Right. SQL can be a bit verbose.
A bit. It's like writing a novel sometimes, even with CTEs.
I'll give you that. There are times you end up with a SQL query that's longer than the actual data you're trying to retrieve. I get why people find the JQ-style piping appealing. It can be very elegant, especially for simple queries.
For sure. But is there a trade-off? Is there a point where that brevity comes at the expense of clarity?
That's the danger, right? SQL structure, while wordy, comes from its expressive power. When you're writing those really complex queries, with joins and subqueries and aggregations, that explicitness is actually crucial.
So it's like the difference between a quick sketch and a detailed blueprint. They both have their place.
Exactly. Sometimes you need that level of detail and precision. You can't always take shortcuts.
That's a great way to think about it. And speaking of choosing the right tool, there's a whole camp over on Hacker News saying, forget Squid.io, just learn SQL properly. They're calling it a job superpower and everything. So in a world that's always pushing for simpler tools and more abstraction, do you think SQL is still that essential?
Job superpower might be pushing it a bit.
Just a tad, maybe.
But look, there's no doubt that SQL is absolutely fundamental in the data world. And I'm not just talking about knowing the syntax. It's about understanding the relational model, understanding set-based logic, understanding how databases actually work. These are the concepts that underpin so much of the technology we use every day.
So it's about more than just being able to write a query. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
Precisely. Plus, let's not forget the sheer maturity of the SQL ecosystem. The documentation, the community support, you just don't get that overnight. With a new tool like Squid.io, you're essentially on your own.
You're venturing into uncharted territory.
Exactly. So while it might be tempting to jump on the newest, shiniest bandwagon, there's a lot to be said for sticking with the tools that have stood the test of time.
You've definitely given me a lot to think about. But going back to the Hacker News thread, some developers are saying there are some specific scenarios where Square really shines.
Oh yeah, like what?
Well, for example, a couple of people mentioned that outputting data in JSON or CSV is super easy with Squid.io.
Okay, I can see that.
It could be kind of a pain in SQL.
Right. Yeah, you often end up having to build up those strings manually.
Exactly. So maybe it's not an either situation.
I'm with you on that. It's like having a specialized tool in your toolbox. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail.
Perfect analogy. So Squid.io could be handy for those quick data extractions, formatting stuff for scripts, that kind of thing. But when we're talking about heavy-duty data analysis, like really getting into the weeds of a database, SQL is still the way to go.
100%. When you need that power, that expressiveness, nothing beats SQL. Imagine trying to analyze a huge social network with all those connections and relationships using something like Squeeze.io.
It would be like trying to navigate a maze in the dark.
Exactly. Or imagine digging into a massive e-commerce data set, trying to find patterns and trends. SQL gives you the tools to do that effectively.
It's the difference between using a magnifying glass and a high-powered microscope.
Right. Sometimes you need that granular level of detail and control.
This whole conversation has really highlighted the passion people have for their tools. It's almost like there are two camps, Team SQL and Team Squid.io.
It's true. People get very attached to the tools they use. And, one comment that stood out to me talked about the importance of mental models.
Mental models, like how our brains are wired.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that we all have different ways of thinking about and solving problems. Some people are naturally drawn to certain types of tools and approaches.
It makes sense when you put it like that. We all have our own ways of organizing information and approaching challenges.
Exactly. And just like you wouldn't force a visual thinker to work exclusively with spreadsheets, you can't expect every developer to thrive with the same set of tools.
Some people love their mind maps, others their to-do lists. I guess coding's not so different after all.
Right. It's about finding what clicks with your brain. Some devs might love Squee.io simplicity. That piping concept just makes sense to them. Others might feel more at home with SQL structure, its logic.
Neither one is better, really.
Yeah.
It's about what works for you.
Exactly. And instead of getting bogged down in these my tool is better than yours debates, we should be encouraging developers to find what helps them be their most productive, most creative selves.
Because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Well, getting the job done and hopefully enjoying the process along the way.
100%. This whole thing reminds me of that saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Well, like that.
You get so used to one tool, one way of doing things, that you might miss out on more elegant solutions just because they're outside your comfort zone.
That's such an important reminder.
Oh.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into SQL.io and the whole SQL versus new tool debate, what are your big takeaways? What should our listeners keep in mind as they navigate this ever-changing world of data tools?
2 things come to mind. First, approach new tools with curiosity, absolutely, but also a critical eye. Don't be afraid to experiment, to see if a tool fits your workflow, but also ask yourself, does it actually solve a real problem for me? Does it help me understand the underlying concepts better? Or am I just chasing the hype?
Don't just follow the shiny new thing blindly. Make sure it has real value for you.
Exactly. And secondly, don't underestimate the importance of mastering those fundamental concepts and technologies. Things like SQL, they're not going anywhere.
They're the foundation.
Exactly. Even as new tools pop up and abstractions evolve, understanding the fundamentals will help you learn those new things faster, make better decisions about which tools to invest your time in.
It's like having a strong foundation, so you can build whatever you want on top of it. You can explore new territory, but you've got your compass and map to guide you.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. What started as a look at one tool turned into a much bigger discussion about innovation, about mastering your craft, and finding the tools that really work for you.
It's a good reminder that the best tools often feel like extensions of how we already think, and that embracing that diversity of thought, it's key to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in tech.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for more adventures in the world of tech.